You know that feeling. You are standing at the gate, boarding pass in hand, watching the person in front of you slide their roller bag into the sizer. It goes in, it fits. You exhale. Then the gate agent looks up, scans the boarding pass, and says those 4 words that have ended vacations before they even began. We need to check this. Your bag catches on the lip of the bin. It is sticking out by an inch. An inch. You argue, you reason. You point out that you flew here with this exact bag on this exact airline 3 months ago, and nobody said a word. The gate agent does not care. Your bag is tagged. It goes below. You board with nothing but your nerves and a small pouch you emptied into your coat pockets at the last second. And now I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself before you even think about typing your answer in the comments. When was the last time you actually, genuinely, without guessing, checked the carry-on size limits for the specific airline you were flying, on the specific route you were taking, during the specific season you traveled, and verified that your bag complied not just with the measurement listed on their website, but with the physical sizer they use at the gate? I am not asking if you think you know the rules. I am asking when you last confirmed them. Because here is the uncomfortable truth that airlines are counting on you not realizing until it is too late. The rules you remember from last year or the year before or even 3 months ago are not the rules you will be held to in 2026. And if you show up at the airport operating on old information, you are not just rolling the dice. You are handing the airline your wallet. Let me be very clear about something right at the top because I need you to understand the stakes here. This is not about an inch. It never was. It is about revenue, it is about cargo space, and it is about the quiet but deliberate tightening of what the industry calls cabin baggage allowances. Airlines do not wake up one morning and decide to become stricter out of spite, though I know it feels that way when you are standing at the gate repacking your dirty laundry into a plastic bin for everyone to watch. They become stricter because checked bag fees are increasingly their most reliable profit center, and every bag that goes into the cargo hold instead of the overhead bin is another $40, $50, $70 they did not have to spend on fuel or labor. But they cannot just raise the fees arbitrarily without risking customer backlash. So they do something far more clever. They hold the line on fees while shrinking the definition of what counts as a free carry-on. And they do it slowly enough that most travelers do not notice until they are standing in the jet bridge, defeated. That is what 2026 is shaping up to be. Not a dramatic overhaul of the rules, not a sudden announcement that changes everything overnight, but a steady, relentless creep of enforcement, of sizers being placed earlier in the boarding process, of auditors walking the queue looking for bags that appear too large, of airlines quietly updating their measurement standards to include every protruding handle, every exterior pocket, every wheel that you thought somehow did not count. They counted. They always counted. But now they are counting them in a way that you cannot talk your way out of. I want you to think about your bag for a moment. Not the brand, not the color, not the fact that you got it as a gift 3 years ago and it has been all over Europe and back without a single issue. I want you to think about its dimensions, not the ones on the tag, because manufacturers have been lying to you for years, and they are very good at it. The tag says 22 by 14 by 9. That is the bag itself, empty, before it has ever been packed. But when you stuff it full, the sides bulge. The front pocket expands. The telescoping handle, that handle you pull up to roll it through the terminal, that handle adds half an inch or more to the height depending on how it is designed. The wheels, those little plastic discs that glide so smoothly over polished concrete, they protrude from the back. Some airlines measure from the highest point to the lowest point, handle up, wheels included. Some airlines measure the bag as it sits in the sizer, and if the handle prevents it from sliding in cleanly, it fails. And here is where it gets genuinely deceptive. Airlines are not required to use the same measurement standard from one route to the next. A bag that is perfectly compliant on a mainline domestic carrier operating out of a major hub might be flagged as oversized on that same carrier when the flight is operated by a regional affiliate using smaller aircraft. The aircraft type matters. The overhead bin dimensions vary, and the gate agent is not measuring your bag against the airline published limit. They are measuring it against the physical reality of the bin on that specific plane. If your bag is too tall to fit in the CRJ 900 bin without crushing the ceiling panel, it is going to be checked. It does not matter that it fits on the Boeing 737 you flew last week. That flight is over. This is now. Now I need to address something that I see travelers get wrong constantly, and it is going to sound like I am splitting hairs, but I promise you, this is the difference between keeping your bag with you and watching it disappear down the slide to the ramp. The size limit is not a suggestion. It is not a flexible guideline. It is not something the gate agent has discretion to waive because you are polite or because you have status or because you explain that you really need your camera equipment for the shoot tomorrow. The gate agent has discretion, yes, but that discretion is exercised within a framework that increasingly penalizes them for allowing exceptions. Airlines audit their gate agents. They send secret shoppers or compliance officers or whatever internal term they use to observe boarding and note whether agents are enforcing the size rules consistently. If an agent is flagged for being too lenient, they receive coaching, they receive warnings, and eventually they receive consequences. The agent who lets your bag slide today might be the same agent who writes you up tomorrow because their supervisor is standing 3 feet behind them watching the line. You cannot predict the circumstances. You cannot read the agent. You cannot charm your way out of a policy that is actively being enforced against the enforcers themselves. And this is why I keep saying that 2026 is different. It is not that the rules are new. It is that the tolerance is gone. The buffer zone that travelers relied on for years, that unofficial extra inch of forgiveness, that grace period where an agent would wave you through because the flight was light and the bins were empty, that buffer has been systematically eliminated across the industry. Airlines have realized that inconsistent enforcement creates customer confusion and resentment. If one agent lets a borderline bag through and another agent 3 gates down forces a passenger to check theirs, that passenger is not confused. They are angry. They feel singled out. They file complaints. So the solution, from the airline perspective, is to make enforcement absolute. No gray areas, no judgment calls. Either it fits or it flies below. Let me describe a scenario to you, and I want you to imagine yourself in this position because it happens several hundred times a day at airports across the United States. You arrive at the gate 45 minutes before departure. You have your coffee, your book, your boarding pass on your phone. You find a seat near the charging station and settle in. 20 minutes later, a gate agent picks up the microphone and announces that due to a full flight, they will be gate-checking bags for anyone who would like to volunteer. You ignore this because you have a small roller bag and a backpack and you are perfectly capable of handling both. You do not volunteer. 15 minutes before boarding, another agent walks through the seating area holding a silver sizer, the metal frame that looks like a cage for a very small dog, and begins asking passengers to place their roller bags in it. You watch as 3 people in the row ahead of you fail. Their bags are too tall or too wide, or the wheels catch on the edge. One woman argues that her bag fit on the way here, and the agent tells her, politely but firmly, that the way here was a different aircraft, and these are the rules for this flight. She is directed to the side to have her bag tagged. You look at your bag. You have traveled with it for 4 years. You have never been asked to put it in a sizer before, but you are feeling a creeping anxiety because you realize you have never actually tested it. You have only assumed. When the agent reaches you, you place the bag in the frame and it stops. It does not go all the way down. The handle, that stupid handle that you never even think about, is preventing the bag from sitting flush. The agent does not say anything. They just look at the protrusion, look at you, and hold out the tag. Now what do? Do you argue? Do you point out that the bag is 22 inches and the limit is 22 inches? Do you ask to measure it yourself? Do you become the person holding up the boarding line while 40 other passengers wait to scan their passes? This is the moment. This is where your trip pivots. And the only way to avoid being in this moment is to know, not guess, not assume, not hope, but know with absolute certainty that your bag conforms to the standard of the airline you are flying on the day you are flying. So let us talk about what that knowledge actually requires, because it is more complicated than pulling a tape measure across the suitcase shell. Airlines in the United States do not have a unified standard for carry-on dimensions. They each set their own limits, and those limits are not arbitrary, but they are certainly strategic. The major domestic carriers, American, Delta, United, all publish a limit of 22 by 14 by 9 inches. That is the industry standard that has existed for years. But Southwest, which historically allowed a slightly larger bag, recently completed its transition to the same 22-inch limit, eliminating the extra margin that loyal Southwest flyers once enjoyed. Alaska, JetBlue, Spirit, Frontier, they all have variations. Sometimes by an inch, sometimes by a half inch, sometimes in how they measure the bag with wheels and handles included. And this is just the legacy and low-cost carriers operating standard mainline aircraft. When you book a flight on American Eagle, Delta Connection, or United Express, you are flying on a regional jet or turboprop operated by a partner airline, and those aircraft have smaller bins. The published carry-on limit for the mainline carrier still applies, technically, because the ticket is sold under the mainline brand. But physically, your bag may not fit. And this is where the disconnect happens. The airline does not change the size limit when you book a regional flight. They do not warn you at purchase that your perfectly compliant mainline bag is going to be flagged at the gate because the CRJ200 has bins that barely accommodate a garment bag. They rely on you to figure this out, either by volunteering to gate check before boarding or by being told at the aircraft door that your bag must be handed over. And if you have ever watched a grown adult negotiate with a flight attendant at the front of a regional jet while 30 passengers wait behind them on the jet bridge, you know this is not a dignified experience. Here is a piece of insight that very few travelers understand, and it is going to save you considerable frustration if you remember it. The sizer at the gate is not necessarily the same dimensions as the overhead bin. It is a proxy, a tool that the airline uses to approximate fit, but it is often more restrictive than the bin itself. Why would an airline do this? Because it is far easier to reject a bag at the gate, where there is space to process the check and tag the bag, than it is at the aircraft door, where the flight attendant is under pressure to keep the boarding process moving. The gate sizer is deliberately calibrated to catch bags that are borderline before they ever reach the plane. This means that even if you know your bag physically fits in the overhead bin of the specific aircraft you are flying, you still have to pass through the gate sizer test if the airline chooses to use it, and they are choosing to use it more and more frequently. Not every gate has a sizer. Not every agent uses it on every passenger, but the trend is unmistakable. Airlines are deploying sizers earlier in the boarding process, sometimes during general boarding, sometimes during pre-boarding, sometimes even at the check-in counter for passengers who are attempting to avoid a checked bag fee by carrying on a bag that is obviously too large. I have seen passengers at LaGuardia, at O'Hare, at LAX, standing at the check-in kiosk with a bag that is clearly designed for cargo hold travel, a massive spinner that barely meets the weight limit for checked luggage, trying to convince the agent that it is a carry-on. It does not work. The agent brings out the tape measure, or the sizer, or simply uses their trained eye, and the passenger is sent back to the counter to pay the fee. Do not be this passenger. You are not outsmarting anyone. I want to dig into the psychology of this for a moment because I think it explains why otherwise intelligent travelers keep making the same mistake. We have an emotional attachment to our carry-on bags that we do not have with checked luggage. The carry-on is with us from curb to seat. It contains the things we might need during the flight, our medications, our electronics, our change of clothes in case the airline loses our checked bag, which happens more often than we like to admit. We trust our carry-on. It is our companion, and we interpret any attempt to separate us from it as an affront, a challenge to our competence and our preparation. This is why people argue with gate agents over an inch. It is not about the inch. It is about the principle, about the fact that they planned, they measured, they bought a bag that was marketed as meeting airline standards, and now they are being told it is not good enough. But here is the reality that is difficult to accept. The airline does not care about your planning. They do not care about the marketing claims on the suitcase tag. They do not care that you spent extra money for a bag that was advertised as carry-on compliant. The only thing that matters is whether your bag, as it exists right now, full of your belongings, expanded by your packing choices, fits inside the physical sizer they are holding. If it does not, you are checking it. And the more you argue, the more you delay the boarding process, the more irritated the passengers behind you become, and the more certain it is that the agent will not change their mind. I have never, in all my years of travel, seen a gate agent reverse a size rejection because the passenger made a compelling case. It simply does not happen. The policy is not negotiable at that point. The negotiation window closed the moment you book the ticket without verifying the current rules. Let me shift focus slightly because I want to address a category of traveler that is disproportionately affected by these tightening rules, and that is the premium cabin passenger. There is a widespread belief that if you are sitting in first class or business class or even just the extra legroom economy seats, you are somehow exempt from the carry-on size restrictions. This belief is false, and it is becoming more obviously false with each passing year. Airlines do not grant first-class passengers the right to bring larger bags. They grant first-class passengers the right to board earlier, which gives them access to overhead bin space before the economy passengers crowd the aisle. That is the benefit. The size limit remains the same. I have watched passengers in fully flat business class seats on transcontinental flights be told their roller bag is too large and must be checked. They are incredulous. They point to their fare, their status, their years of loyalty. The gate agent is unmoved. The bag does not fit the sizer, and the aircraft has limited bin capacity. In fact, premium cabin passengers are often held to a stricter standard because the bins in first class are sometimes shaped differently to accommodate the larger seat shells, and a bag that fits in the main cabin bin may not fit above a first-class seat. This is an irony that few people anticipate. You pay more for a better seat and end up checking the bag you intended to keep with you. The solution is not to argue. The solution is to verify your bag dimensions against the specific aircraft configuration for your flight, which you can find using the airline website or third-party tools that track seat maps and bin dimensions. It is tedious. It is probably more research than you wanted to do for a simple trip, but it is the only way to be certain. Now I need to talk about the personal item, because this is where the 2026 rules are going to catch the largest number of unsuspecting travelers. For years, the personal item was the loophole, the gray area, the place where you could stash all the things that would not fit in your roller bag without anyone questioning the size. You had a backpack, a tote, a duffel, a shopping bag, and as long as it fit under the seat in front of you, nobody measured it, nobody weighed it, nobody cared. That era is ending. The ultra-low-cost carriers, Spirit, Frontier, Allegiant, have been aggressively enforcing personal item size limits for years, and now the major airlines are taking notice. American, Delta, and United all have published personal item dimensions, usually around 18 by 14 by 8 inches, but they have historically been lenient in enforcing these limits. That leniency is disappearing. I am seeing more and more reports from travelers who are being asked at the gate to place their backpack in the sizer and failing and being charged $40, $50, $60 to bring it on board. This is not a mistake. This is a deliberate expansion of the revenue stream that was previously limited to oversized roller bags. Airlines have realized that there is money in personal items, that passengers will pay to keep their bag with them, and that the emotional attachment to a backpack is even stronger than the attachment to a roller bag. You cannot easily repack a backpack into a checked bag. It is awkwardly shaped, it has straps that get caught in conveyor belts, and it contains your laptop, your charger, your headphones, the things you were counting on for the flight. When you are told your personal item is too large, you are not just paying a fee, you are paying to maintain access to your essentials. And the airlines know this. They are pricing the fee accordingly. So, what constitutes a compliant personal item in 2026? The standard dimensions across most airlines are roughly the size of a small to medium backpack, not the hiking packs that students bring for semester abroad programs, not the overstuffed weekender bags that women use as carry-ons on European trains. It is a bag that fits under the seat without encroaching on the legroom of the passenger behind you. And here is the complication. The underseat dimensions vary by aircraft type. Some seats have more clearance than others. Some have metal boxes underneath that reduce the available space. Some have entertainment system components that intrude into the footwell. The personal item sizer at the gate is calibrated to the most restrictive seat on the aircraft, not the average seat. This means that a bag that fits comfortably under your seat in row 12 might not fit under the seat in row 30, and the gate agent is not going to measure your bag against your specific seat assignment. They are measuring against the standard. If your bag exceeds that standard, you are paying the fee. I have started advising travelers to think of the personal item not as a secondary bag, but as a supplement to the primary carry-on. If you are bringing a roller bag, your personal item should be significantly smaller than the maximum allowed, because the combined bulk of two bags, even if each individually meets the size limit, can be visually flagged by gate agents as excessive. You do not want to attract attention. You want to move through the boarding process unnoticed. Your bags tucked away, your boarding pass scanned, your seat found. The moment an agent pauses to look at your bags, you are at risk. Minimize that risk by downsizing. I want to pause here and address something that I know is on your mind. You are probably thinking, this is all very alarming, but I have been flying for decades and I have never had a problem, so why should I change what I am doing? It is a fair question. It is the question that keeps the airline revenue departments funded. Because the truth is, most passengers do not get caught. Most flights, the gate agent does not sizer every bag. Most travelers walk onto the plane with bags that are technically too large, but visually borderline, and they find a bin and they shove it in, and the door closes, and nobody is the wiser. This is why the airlines are shifting their strategy. They do not need to catch everyone. They just need to catch enough passengers to make the enforcement effort profitable. And they need to create enough uncertainty that travelers start voluntarily downsizing their bags before they ever reach the airport. The psychology of enforcement is not about catching violators. It is about deterring violation. When you see 3 people in front of you being forced to check their bags, you start to wonder if your bag is next. You start to reconsider whether you really need that extra pair of shoes. You start to measure your bag at home before you pack. This is exactly what the airlines want. They want you to self-regulate. They want you to arrive at the gate with a bag that fits the sizer without being asked. Because every passenger who voluntarily complies saves the airline the cost of training agents, maintaining equipment, and processing complaints. The enforcement at the gate is the stick. The fear of enforcement is the real driver of behavior change. Let me give you a concrete example of how this plays out in practice, using an airline that has been particularly aggressive in its carry-on enforcement. Frontier Airlines, for many years, had a reputation for strict size limits and high fees. Passengers learned to measure their bags carefully before traveling on Frontier. But recently, Frontier changed its approach. They increased the size limit for carry-on bags slightly, making it closer to the industry standard, and simultaneously increased the fee for bringing an oversized bag to the gate. On the surface, this looks like a relaxation of the rules. In practice, it is a revenue optimization strategy. By raising the limit, Frontier reduces the number of passengers who are caught off guard and forced to pay the fee, which reduces customer complaints and negative publicity. But they keep the fee high enough that the passengers who do violate the rules are paying a premium for the privilege. And they continue to strictly enforce the personal item size, which is smaller than the major airlines and catches many unsuspecting travelers who assume their backpack will be fine. This is the new normal, not uniform strictness across all categories, but strategic enforcement where the airline believes the profit margin is highest. You cannot predict which airline will be strict on which bag on which day. You can only prepare. I want to talk about measurement because I think this is the area where even experienced travelers make fundamental errors that cost them time and money. When you measure your bag at home, you are measuring the shell. You are not measuring the contents. You are not measuring the expansion. You are not measuring the handle. And you are almost certainly not measuring the wheels in the way that the airline measures them. The standard method that airlines use, the method that is encoded in the design of the sizers, is to measure the bag at its widest, tallest, and deepest points when it is standing upright in the orientation it would be placed in the bin. This means the handle, if it is raised at all, counts toward the height. The wheels count toward the depth. Any external pocket that is stuffed with a water bottle or a charging brick counts toward the width. And if your bag is soft-sided and you have packed it to its full capacity, the sides will bulge outward, increasing the depth beyond the manufacturer's specification. I have seen passengers attempt to argue that their bag is 21 inches because they measured it without the handle extended. While the sizer clearly shows the handle extending above the rim, the agent is not measuring your bag. They are measuring the space your bag occupies. If the handle occupies that space, it is part of the bag. End of discussion. The only way to be certain is to pack your bag completely, extend the handle, and measure it yourself using a rigid measuring device, not a fabric tape measure that can bend around curves and give you a false reading. Place the bag on a flat surface, put a book on top of the handle, and measure from the floor to the top of the book. That is your height. Measure from the back of the wheels to the front of the bag, including any bulging pockets. That is your depth. And measure the width at the widest point, which is often the top of the bag where the handle mechanism is housed. If any of these measurements exceed the airline limit, even by a quarter inch, you are at risk. Now I need to address a topic that makes people uncomfortable, but it is essential to understanding why your bag might be rejected, even when it technically meets the size limits. The issue is weight. Most U.S. airlines do not publish weight limits for carry-on bags. They do not weigh them at the gate. But they have the authority to do so, and they occasionally exercise that authority, particularly on small regional aircraft where the combined weight of passengers and baggage affects fuel calculations and takeoff performance. If you are flying on a 50-seat regional jet, the flight attendants are acutely aware of the weight distribution in the cabin. They know that a carry-on bag that is packed with heavy equipment, camera gear, books, or even just too many pairs of jeans can exceed the structural limits of the overhead bin or the weight capacity of the bin latch. I have seen passengers on small aircraft told that their bag must be checked because it is too heavy for the bin, and the passenger protests that it fits. It fits. Look, it slides right in. The issue is not fit. The issue is that the bin cannot safely hold 40 pounds of luggage suspended over the heads of passengers. The airline is not going to take that risk. And once again, you cannot argue your way out of a safety decision. The flight attendant is not going to say, "You are right. This bin is rated for 45 pounds. Go ahead and close it." they are going to send your bag to the hold. This is another reason why downsizing is not just about dimensions. It is about total mass. The lighter your bag, the less likely it is to draw attention from crew members who are trained to spot overloaded luggage. I want to take you behind the counter for a moment, metaphorically, and explain how the gate agents themselves view this process. I have spoken with several current and former airline employees about the carry-on enforcement dynamic, and there is a consistent theme that emerges. Gate agents do not enjoy rejecting bags. They do not wake up in the morning hoping to charge a passenger $40 for a slightly oversized backpack. They are in customer service roles, and they are evaluated in part on their ability to board flights on time and maintain positive interactions with passengers. But they are also under pressure from management to meet revenue targets and enforce compliance. This creates a psychological tension that often plays out in unpredictable ways. Some agents become enforcers, strict and unwavering, because it is easier to apply the rules uniformly than to make judgment calls. Other agents become lenient, waving through borderline bags whenever possible, because they value the customer relationship over the incremental revenue. And still other agents shift between these modes depending on the day, the flight load, the behavior of the passenger, or even the weather. You cannot read the agent. You cannot predict which mode they are in. The only reliable strategy is to present a bag that no reasonable agent could consider oversized. If your bag is clearly within the limits, you are invisible to the enforcement process. If your bag is borderline, you are subject to the agent interpretation, and that interpretation is not under your control. Let me give you a scenario that illustrates why this unpredictability is so dangerous for travelers. You are flying from New York to Los Angeles on a wide-body aircraft with ample bin space. The gate agent is experienced, relaxed, and has been on shift for 6 hours without a break. A passenger approaches with a bag that is clearly 2 inches too tall. The agent glances at it, waves them through, and does not even mention the size. You are standing behind this passenger with your own bag, which is exactly at the limit but not over. You watch this interaction and you think, great, they are not checking today. You approach the agent, place your bag in the sizer, and it catches on the handle. The agent looks at the protrusion, looks at you, and tells you the bag must be checked. You point out that the passenger ahead of you had a larger bag and was allowed to board. The agent tells you they did not see that passenger, or that the other bag was different, or that you need to move aside and tag your bag. You are now in a situation where you have been treated differently than the person in front of you, and you feel the injustice of it, but you have no recourse. The agent is not going to reverse their decision because you noticed an inconsistency. Inconsistency is inherent to human decision-making. The only way to avoid being the victim of inconsistency is to eliminate the ambiguity that gives the agent discretion. If your bag fits the sizer cleanly, with no pushing, no shoving, no handle obstruction, you are not asking the agent to make a judgment. You are simply complying with the rule. This is the goal. I need to talk about international travel now because the rules change dramatically when you leave the United States, and many American travelers are caught off guard by how strict other countries are about carry-on dimensions. European airlines, particularly the low-cost carriers like Ryanair, EasyJet, and Wizz Air, have been enforcing size limits with an intensity that U.S. carriers are only now beginning to emulate. They measure bags at the gate. They charge fees that can exceed the cost of the ticket itself. They do not accept arguments about previous flights or manufacturer specifications, and they are increasingly using automated sizing systems that remove human discretion entirely. You place your bag in the sizer, a light turns red or green, and the fee is assessed automatically. This is the future of carry-on enforcement, and it is coming to the United States. Several U.S. airlines have already tested automated bag measurement systems at select gates, and while they have not been widely deployed yet, the technology exists and the incentive to use it is growing. Imagine a gate where you do not interact with an agent at all. You approach the boarding scanner, your face is recognized, your boarding pass is confirmed, and your bag is automatically measured as you walk through a sensor array. If it exceeds the limit, the system flags you and directs you to a fee payment kiosk before you can proceed. This is not science fiction. This is a pilot program that is already in use at some international airports, and it is only a matter of time before it reaches domestic terminals in the U.S. So, what do you do with all of this information? How do you prepare for a travel environment where the rules are tightening, enforcement is becoming more automated, and the margin for error is shrinking to zero? The answer is not complicated, but it is inconvenient. And I suspect many of you will resist it because it requires admitting that your current bag is not adequate for the 2026 travel environment. You need a new bag. Not necessarily a different bag, but a bag that is smaller than the maximum allowance, not equal to it. You need a buffer. You need a bag that measures, when fully packed with the handle extended, at least half an inch smaller than the airline limit in every dimension. This buffer protects you against variations in size or calibration, against the bulging that occurs when you pack tightly, against the subtle differences in measurement standards between airlines. It also protects you against the psychological bias that gate agents develop when they see a bag that is exactly at the limit. There is something about a bag that perfectly meets the published dimensions that triggers skepticism in an experienced agent. They have seen too many bags that were supposed to be 22 inches but turned out to be 22 3/4. They have heard too many passengers insist that their bag is compliant only to watch it get stuck in the sizer. When you present a bag that is clearly smaller than the maximum, you signal that you are a knowledgeable traveler who understands the rules and is not trying to push the boundary. This subconscious signal is worth more than any argument you could make at the gate. Now I want to address the packing strategy that I have developed over years of observing this dynamic. And I want to be clear that this is not a generic list of tips. This is a specific approach to minimizing the risk of rejection while maximizing the utility of the limited space you are allowed. The first principle is that hard-sided bags are inherently riskier than soft-sided bags in the current enforcement environment. Hard-sided bags do not compress. They do not flex. When you place a hard-sided bag in a sizer, what you see is what you get. If it is a 1/4 inch too tall, it does not fit. Period. Soft-sided bags, by contrast, have some give. You can push them down slightly to clear the top of the sizer. You can squeeze the sides to reduce the apparent width. This does not mean you should attempt to force a bag that is clearly too large into a sizer. That is a recipe for damage and embarrassment. But if your bag is borderline, the slight compressibility of fabric construction can make the difference between a clean fit and a rejection. This is why I generally recommend soft-sided luggage for travelers who fly multiple airlines with varying size limits. The flexibility gives you options that rigid bags do not. The second principle is that external pockets are your enemy. They seem convenient. You can stash your water bottle, your book, your charging cable, your snacks, all within easy reach. But every external pocket that is packed adds bulk to the bag. It increases the depth, the width, or both, and it creates irregular surfaces that catch on the edges of the sizer. A bag with bulging side pockets is much more likely to be flagged than a clean, smooth bag with all contents stored internally. I have started advising travelers to treat external pockets as empty compartments, useful only for flat items like documents or a thin tablet that does not protrude. Everything else goes inside the main compartment, even if it is slightly less convenient to access. The trade-off is worth it when you consider the alternative of paying a $40 fee at the gate. The third principle is that wheeled bags are becoming obsolete for certain types of travel. I know this is a controversial statement, and I am not saying you should never bring a roller bag. They are convenient, ergonomic, and widely used, but the wheels and the handle mechanism add significant bulk to the dimensions, and that bulk is increasingly being counted against you. A duffel bag or a backpack that meets the size requirements without wheels can often carry the same volume as a roller bag that is technically oversized, simply because the roller bag has to sacrifice interior space to accommodate the frame and wheels. If you are traveling for a short trip, 2 or 3 days, consider whether you truly need wheels. A well-designed travel backpack with a hip belt and compression straps can be more comfortable to carry through the terminal than a roller bag that you have to lift over curbs and upstairs. And it will fit in the sizer every time because you can compress it to match the dimensions. This is not about nostalgia for old-fashioned luggage. This is about adapting to the reality that airlines are tightening the physical envelope for carry-ons, and wheeled bags are at a structural disadvantage. Let me give you an example of a traveler who made this transition and found it liberating. A colleague of mine, a photographer who travels weekly for commercial shoots, spent years dragging a hard-sided roller bag through airports. He was constantly at the limit, constantly anxious about whether his bag would be flagged. He measured it before every trip, repacked it carefully, and still occasionally had to gate check it on regional jets. Finally, he switched to a 40-liter duffel bag with backpack straps. It weighs less than half of his roller bag, carries more gear because there is no wasted space for wheels and frame, and compresses down to fit under the seat of any aircraft he flies. He has not gate-checked a bag in 2 years. He boards earlier because his bag is compact and unobtrusive. He moves through security faster because the bag fits easily into the screening bin. He has more energy at his destination because he is not wrestling with a heavy roller bag through unfamiliar terminals. This is the direction that savvy travelers are moving, not because they are forced to, but because they recognize that the old model of carry-on luggage is becoming incompatible with the new enforcement reality. I need to talk about the role of airline status in this equation because there is a persistent myth that frequent flyer status provides some kind of immunity from size enforcement. It does not. What status provides is access to priority boarding, which gives you first dibs on overhead bin space. It does not exempt you from the size limit. In fact, I have observed that elite status passengers are sometimes held to a stricter standard because gate agents assume they should know better. The agent thinks, you fly 100,000 miles a year, you should have a bag that fits the sizer. Why are you pushing the limit? This is not a conscious bias in most cases, but it is a real dynamic. The passenger who flies twice a year and shows up with an oversized bag is seen as ignorant, forgivable, maybe deserving of a warning. The elite status passenger who does the same thing is seen as entitled, trying to exploit their status to bend the rules. The agent is less likely to give them a pass, so if you have status, do not assume it is a shield. Assume it is a spotlight. You are more visible to the enforcement process, not less. Now I want to shift to a topic that is uncomfortable but necessary, and that is the behavior of passengers when they are told their bag must be checked. I have watched hundreds of these interactions, and I have seen the full spectrum of human response. The passenger who argues loudly that they have flown this route 50 times and never had a problem. The passenger who pleads quietly that they have medication in the bag and cannot be separated from it. The passenger who becomes suddenly cooperative, hoping that gracious acceptance of the decision will somehow lead to a reversal. The passenger who attempts to remove items from the bag, shoving them into coat pockets and companion bags, trying to reduce the size just enough to clear the sizer. And the passenger who simply bursts into tears. I understand all of these responses. Travel is stressful. The airport is an environment of constant uncertainty, and having your carefully planned luggage strategy invalidated at the last moment is genuinely upsetting. But I need to tell you something that you will not hear from the gate agent in the moment. The way you respond to a rejection has a direct impact on the likelihood that your bag will be damaged, delayed, or lost in the checked baggage system. Passengers who argue and delay the boarding process are more likely to have their bags tagged in haste with incomplete information and routed incorrectly. Passengers who become aggressive or abusive may find that their bag is placed in the hold with particular carelessness, though I am not suggesting that airline employees would intentionally damage luggage. I am suggesting that human nature is what it is, and a passenger who creates a scene is not inspiring the agent to handle their belongings with extra consideration. The optimal response, from the perspective of getting your bag back safely at your destination, is calm acceptance. You thank the agent, you place the tag on your bag, you watch it go down the belt or onto the cart, and you board the plane. You do not fight a battle you cannot win. You save your energy for the arrival, where you will stand at the baggage carousel and wait for your bag to emerge. And here is the cruel irony of the gate check process. Most of the time, the bag that you were forced to check at the gate will be returned to you at the aircraft door upon landing, not in the baggage claim. This is what airlines call gate checking or valet checking, and it means your bag is one of the last items loaded into the cargo hold and one of the first items brought back up to the jet bridge upon arrival. You do not have to go to the carousel. You do not have to wait with the passengers who checked bags at the ticket counter. You walk off the plane, pick up your bag from the line of bags lined up against the wall, and proceed to your destination. This is not a perfect system. Sometimes bags are misrouted even in gate check, but it is far better than the alternative of having your bag sent to the main baggage system, where it might miss your connection or be loaded onto the wrong flight. The gate check process is designed to minimize the disruption to your travel. The airline knows you did not want to check this bag. They are trying, within the constraints of their system, to get it back to you as quickly as possible. Cooperating with the process increases the likelihood that this happens smoothly. I want to take a moment to address a specific category of traveler that I have not yet discussed, and that is the family traveler. If you are traveling with children, particularly young children, the carry-on rules take on a completely different dimension. You are not just managing your own bags. You are managing diaper bags, strollers, car seats, activity packs, and the emotional state of small humans who do not understand why they have to wait in a long line. or why their favorite toy is suddenly inaccessible. The airlines have historically been lenient with family travelers, allowing diaper bags and other essential items to count as personal items or even as exceptions to the carry-on limits. That leniency is eroding. I am seeing more reports of parents being told that their child's backpack counts as a personal item, and if the child does not have a seat, they do not have a personal item allowance. I am seeing strollers being gate-checked with increasing frequency, even when they are small and foldable, because the overhead bin space is needed for revenue-generating roller bags. And I am seeing families charged for bags that were previously waved through, because the enforcement process does not distinguish between a leisure traveler and a parent juggling 3 children and a connecting flight. This is not fair, and I am not arguing that it is. I am describing the reality of the 2026 travel environment. If you are traveling with children, you need to be even more vigilant about the size and weight of your bags, because you do not have the bandwidth to argue at the gate. Your attention is elsewhere. Your patience is limited. You need to minimize the variables that could derail your trip. That means packing lighter, downsizing your personal items, and accepting that you may need to check bags that you would prefer to carry on. The airline is not going to give you a pass because you have a crying toddler. They are going to expect you to comply with the same rules as everyone else, and if you do not, they will charge you the same fees. Let me give you a concrete example of how this plays out, because I think it illustrates the gap between passenger expectations and airline reality. A family of 4 arrives at the gate for a flight to Orlando. They have 2 roller bags, 2 backpacks for the adults, and 2 small backpacks for the children, ages 6 and 8. The gate agent announces that the flight is full, and any carry-on bags that do not fit under the seat will need to be gate-checked. The parents assume this applies only to the roller bags, so they volunteer those for gate check. The agent then notices the children's backpacks and asks if they contain anything needed during the flight. The parents say yes: snacks, tablets, coloring books. The agent explains that the children's backpacks count as personal items, and since the children are ticketed passengers, they are each entitled to 1 personal item that must fit under the seat in front of them. The backpacks are large, overstuffed, and clearly exceed the size limit. The agent informs the parents that the backpacks must also be gate-checked, or they can remove items and attempt to make them fit in the sizer. The parents are frustrated. They did not anticipate this. They have already paid for the roller bags to be checked. Now they are facing additional fees, or the prospect of repacking their children's entertainment in the middle of the boarding queue. This is not a hypothetical scenario. This is happening at gates across the country, and it is happening more frequently as airlines tighten their enforcement on all bags, not just the obvious offenders. The only way to avoid this situation is to understand, before you arrive at the airport, that every passenger, regardless of age, is subject to the same carry-on limitations. A child's backpack is not automatically exempt. It must meet the size requirements or it will be checked, and you will pay the fee. I want to talk about something that I have avoided mentioning until now because it is the most sensitive aspect of this topic, and that is the behavior of passengers who deliberately attempt to circumvent the rules. I am not talking about the traveler who misjudges their bag dimensions and ends up at the gate with a slightly oversized roller. I am talking about the traveler who knows their bag is too large, who has been told before, who has paid the fee on previous trips, and who continues to bring the same bag because they believe the rules do not apply to them. I am talking about the passenger who removes the price tag from a new bag that is clearly designed for checked luggage and attempts to pass it off as a carry-on. I am talking about the passenger who brings 2 full-sized carry-ons and insists that one of them is a personal item. These passengers are not outsmarting the system. They are making it worse for everyone else. Every time a gate agent has to stop the boarding process to deal with a passenger who is actively trying to evade the rules, the flight is delayed. Every delay increases the pressure on the gate agent to enforce the rules more strictly on subsequent passengers. Every passenger who gets away with bringing an oversized bag encourages other passengers to try the same thing, creating a cycle of escalation that ultimately leads to the stricter enforcement we are seeing now. If you want the rules to be more lenient, you need to be more compliant. It is that simple. The airlines respond to passenger behavior. If passengers consistently show up with compliant bags, the airlines have no incentive to invest in more aggressive enforcement. If passengers consistently push the boundaries, the airlines respond by hardening the boundaries. You are not an individual actor in this system. Your choices affect the experience of every other traveler who comes after you. I want to close this section with a question that I hope you will consider seriously, not as a rhetorical device, but as an actual prompt for self-reflection. What is your bag really worth to you? Not in dollars, but in stress, in time, in the emotional cost of fighting an unwinnable battle at the gate. Is that bag, the one that is exactly 22.5 inches tall with the handle extended, worth the anxiety you feel every time you approach the boarding scanner? Is it worth the risk of being singled out in front of 40 strangers and told that your luggage is not good enough? Is it worth the possibility of missing your connection because you had to wait for your gate-checked bag to be returned at the jet bridge? There is no right answer to these questions. Everyone has different tolerance for risk and different attachment to their belongings. But I will tell you that the travelers I know who travel most frequently, the ones who fly every week for business, the ones who have status on multiple airlines and have seen every possible airport scenario, they are almost universally downsizing. They are moving to smaller bags, lighter bags, more flexible bags. They are not doing this because they are forced to. They are doing it because they have learned that the cost of carrying a borderline bag is higher than the benefit of the extra space. They have optimized for peace of mind, not for volume. And I think that is the direction that all travelers will eventually move, whether voluntarily or under duress. Now I need to address the practical question of how you actually verify the carry-on rules for a specific flight, because this is more complicated than it sounds. You cannot simply visit the airline website and look at the carry-on dimensions page. That page is often outdated, or it presents the general policy without accounting for aircraft-specific variations, or it buries the personal item dimensions in a submenu that is difficult to find. You need to verify the rules for your specific itinerary, on your specific travel dates, and you need to do it as close to departure as possible, because airlines change their policies without announcement. I recommend a 3-step verification process that takes about 10 minutes, but can save you hours of frustration. First, go to the airline website and locate the current carry-on policy. Read it carefully, including any footnotes or linked pages about regional aircraft, basic economy fares, and special items. Write down the dimensions for both carry-on and personal item. Second, check your flight confirmation email or the airline app for the aircraft type assigned to your flight. If it is a regional jet, search for the overhead bin dimensions of that specific aircraft model. You may need to consult third-party aviation websites or forums for this information, because airlines do not publish bin dimensions. Third, pack your bag completely, extend the handle, and measure it using the method I described earlier. Compare your measurements to the airline policy and to the bin dimensions if available. If your bag is within half an inch in all dimensions, you are probably safe. If it is at the exact limit, you are taking a risk. If it exceeds the limit, you need to repack, downsize, or accept that you will be checking the bag. I want to be honest with you about the limitations of this verification process. Even if you do everything correctly, you may still be asked to gate check your bag. The aircraft may be swapped at the last minute for a different model with smaller bins. The gate agent may be having a bad day and decide to enforce the rules more strictly than usual. The flight may be so full that the overhead bins reach capacity before you board, and the flight attendants will start collecting bags at the aircraft door regardless of size. There is no way to guarantee that your bag will stay with you from curb to seat, but there is a way to dramatically reduce the probability of rejection, and that is to carry a bag that is obviously compliant. Not technically compliant, obviously compliant. When a gate agent looks at your bag and immediately sees that it is smaller than the sizer, they do not ask you to test it. They do not flag you for secondary inspection. They scan your boarding pass and you walk onto the plane. This is the goal. Not to win an argument, but to avoid the argument entirely. Let me talk about the future for a moment, because I think it is important to understand where these trends are headed and how you can position yourself to travel with less stress in the years ahead. The airline industry is moving toward a model where the cabin is optimized for revenue, not for passenger convenience. Every inch of overhead bin space is a potential revenue source, and airlines are increasingly treating that space as a premium amenity rather than a basic service. Some airlines already offer discounted fares that do not include any carry-on allowance beyond a small personal item. Passengers who want to bring a roller bag must pay an additional fee, either at booking or at the gate. This model, pioneered by the ultra-low-cost carriers, is spreading to the major airlines through basic economy fares. As of 2026, most U.S. airlines have a fare class that explicitly excludes overhead bin access, limiting passengers to a personal item that must fit under the seat. If you book a basic economy ticket and show up at the gate with a roller bag, you will be charged a fee, often a substantial one, and your bag will be checked. This is not enforcement creep. This is a fundamental restructuring of the airline pricing model. You are no longer paying for transportation with a luggage allowance included. You are paying for transportation, and luggage is an optional add-on. This shift has profound implications for how you should approach carry-on planning. The old strategy of buying a bag that meets the standard dimensions and assuming it will be allowed on all flights is obsolete. You must now consider the fare class when evaluating whether your bag will be permitted. A bag that is perfectly compliant with the carry-on size limit may still be rejected if you purchased a basic economy ticket that does not include carry-on privileges. The gate agent is not rejecting your bag because it is too large. They are rejecting it because you did not pay for the right to bring it on board. This distinction is critical because it means that downsizing your bag will not solve the problem. You could bring a tiny roller bag smaller than the maximum and still be charged the fee if your fare does not include overhead bin access. The only way to avoid this is to either upgrade your fare or accept that you will be checking your bag. Many travelers are resistant to this reality. They believe that if their bag is small enough, the airline will make an exception. They will not. The system is automated. The fare class is encoded in your boarding pass. When the agent scans it, they see whether you have paid for a carry-on allowance. If you have not, they direct you to the fee payment kiosk or tag your bag for checking. There is no discretion. There is no appeal. The only decision you have to make is whether to pay at the gate or pay at the ticket counter, and the gate fee is almost always higher. I want to end this article on a note that is not exactly optimistic, but I hope it is clarifying. The era of relaxed carry-on enforcement is over. It has been ending for several years, and 2026 is the year when it becomes unmistakably clear that the rules are not suggestions and the buffer zone is gone. This is not a temporary measure driven by post-pandemic staffing shortages or fuel price fluctuations. This is a permanent structural change in how airlines generate revenue and manage cabin capacity. You can resist this change, you can complain about it, you can write letters to customer service and post angry comments on social media. None of that will reverse the trend. The only thing you can control is your own preparation. You can measure your bags, you can verify the rules before you travel. You can downsize to a smaller, lighter, more flexible luggage configuration. You can accept that some trips will require checked bags, even for short durations, and you can build that cost and inconvenience into your travel planning. Or you can continue to show up at the gate with a borderline bag, hoping that this time will be different, that the agent will be lenient, that the sizer will be forgiving, that you will slip through one more time. And maybe you will. Most passengers still do, but the probability of rejection is higher than it has ever been, and it is going to keep rising. The question is not whether the airlines will catch you. The question is whether you are willing to take that bet every time you travel. I have made my choice. I hope you make yours with your eyes open.